Okay, Steve, the floor is all yours. I'll just talk. Do you want to tell us a bit about yourself?
Sure. For those of you that have not met me, I am based in Cape Town, and I teach in about 30 schools around Cape Town and a couple around the world using the internet. I'm very involved in promoting STEM-related subjects, but not specifically, because I also do other related content. And it is our mandate to go out and spread the excitement of maths and science to as many people around the world as possible. We're very fortunate in that we get to work with amazing people at Google and at NASA. So we have the fortunate opportunity to take astronauts around to schools and get the kids excited about space and science. When you have a real astronaut talking to students, it takes the excitement about mathematics to a whole new level. So, for example, I know that some of you are very involved in English. Have any of you ever heard of the Divergent series before? You haven't heard the book Allegiance, Divergent? No. Okay. So at the moment, it's a very popular series amongst the teens, and they've just had the movies. The Allegiant movie was out recently, and Divergent was out. So we might get a chance to actually interview the author. Now, you might say, well, what's that got to do with maths and science? But, you know, for me, it's about finding role models, people who have become very successful at what they do, and establishing what it is that they did to get that way, and giving students and teachers an opportunity to ask questions and to connect with them. And in my world, I like to call that democratizing these role models or these celebrities, so that young kids would have access to them, but in real life, they probably wouldn't get close to someone like that because they're so inaccessible. And hopefully, we'll be doing some more very interesting interviews over the next while. I know that because I'm a member of the Humans to Mars Summit, it means that they've tasked me with interviewing all the guest speakers at the event next year. And this year we had the head of NASA, we had a couple of astronauts and the chief NASA scientist. And next year we're talking a whole range of very exciting people, possibly even Brian May. And for those of you who know, he's a member of that small little group called Queen. But what is probably not known much about him is the fact that he is also an astrophysicist. So apart from being a wonderful guitarist, he also knows a lot about space. And he often goes to these big events to give talks all about them. And what I find interesting is that people, if you tell them that you are involving students, and you tell them that you're involving teachers, and you're going to bring students from around the world to be a part of it, many of these celebrities are actually quite happy to give interviews. And so far, we've been very successful. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, we had a very interesting interview with Anastasia Thompson, who is a doctor here in South Africa, and has recently, well, I won't say has recently come out, because part of the dialogue was to learn the correct terminology. She has been transitioning, and she will continue to transition, but she is a transgender activist. And in terms of the terminology, and this is very important, that's why I engage these people, because I want to be sensitive to what they're going through, and it's important to learn how to address the topic correctly and appropriately. She says that when she was born, she was assigned the male gender. But of course, she was always born a woman. And subsequently, through many life experiences, she only came out, so to speak, 2 years ago. But she's written a lovely book on her experience as a transgender activist, and the types of difficulties that she's had to face when coming out, especially being a doctor, and how her peers in the medical profession would then treat her when they actually had access to this information. So we like to interview interesting people. On the 28th of November, I'm looking forward to this one. I'll be interviewing Professor Rob Gaunt. And Rob is the guy that was recently seen on Facebook with one of his patients where they got to connect with Barack Obama. And what happens is I see an article on Facebook and I think, now that's someone I would like to interview. And I go and do a little bit of searching. I find a contact number and I email them. And then generally they tend to say yes. And Rob has planted a chip in the brain of a guy who is paralyzed from his neck downwards. And they then connect a robotic arm, which is not connected to him. It's just a separate device. But they connect it to his brain through this chip. And using thought, he can control the actual robotic hand. So he can think open and close, and the hand will then open and close. And what I find absolutely fascinating, and this is what distinguishes his experiment from previous ones that have been done, they can blindfold the patient and they can wiggle a finger on the robotic arm, and he will tell them which finger they are wiggling. And when they asked him how he knew, this is the part I love the most, he can feel it in his fingertips. So I would love to know, how do they know which part of the brain to put their chip in? How do they know how to read what the brain is telling the actual robotic arm? And what does this hold for people in the future? Can you imagine if you were paralyzed from the neck downwards, but they gave you an exoskeleton robotic body and you put the person in it and all they had to do was think about walking, and this skeleton would do all the walking for them? I think that RoboCop has just come alive. So I like to get my curiosity and put it into Google Hangouts with a whole bunch of people. And then, of course, share that with as many people as possible. So, of course, if I was doing the interview and any of you would like to be involved in it, Howie would just give me your contact details and you could actually join in live on the interview. And then you get to ask questions too, which I think makes it quite exciting. And then, of course, it's not only the maths and the science that I'm excited about. I recently had a colleague of mine in Denmark who said to me that he has got a group of Danish students that are very poor or slow readers. Would I be able to help them with their Danish? Now, the only thing I know about Danish is apple danishes that you get from the bakery. And unfortunately, that's not going to help me to teach anyone to speak Danish. So I got to rack my brain, how will I get to do an activity like that with these kids? And I came up with this idea of creating, well, I first asked him, what were they learning about? And he said they were learning a poem. So I then asked him for a copy of the poem, and I then created a word search from the poem with keywords that I looked, well, I did a little bit of Google searching on Google Translate, and I found out which were the keywords. And I then started off the session with these kids, reading to them this actual poem. And since I have no way of actually knowing how to pronounce the words in Danish, they were laughing themselves silly because they realized here was someone who was very poor at Danish, but then I asked them to correct me. So they were quite happy to stand up and say, oh, this is how you're supposed to read it. And they corrected me throughout the entire poem. And then I challenged them to see who could find the most words in the word search. So what they ended up doing was having fun, correcting my Danish by actually speaking Danish. And they all read the poem and were able to explain to me what the poem was all about. And obviously the teacher had to do a little bit of translating as well. But I think that the medium of using the internet to run sessions, here we have, for example, a wonderful session where we can communicate and it's seamless and I could share photos and pictures with you. I think it's a wonderful opportunity to connect and enrich your classes as teachers and to make learning far more exciting. So, you know, when I think of connecting with teachers, I teach with about 200 teachers around the world, and we have a group on the internet where if, for example, their kids are doing a presentation, then I will join in as a guest judge. The teacher will send me a Google form, which I will then complete while the presentation is being done, and then they can read the feedback to the students from international panel of judges, so to speak. We've done fun activities. Just 2 days ago, I had a friend of mine from Austria, and we were trying to establish the cost of living in Austria and South Africa. And what was interesting to me is, how do you find out if it's cheaper to live in one country or not? And the best way to do that is obviously to compare apples with apples. So I asked them what it would cost for a tin of Coke. And I asked them what it would cost them for a Big Mac meal, a medium meal. And then they gave their costs to me in euros. I then gave them the costs in rands. And then we converted the euros to rands to then compare rands against rands. And it turns out that, according to my calculations, in South Africa, we are more than half the price to what they'd be paying in Austria. So I think that when it comes to teaching and learning from each other, using programs like Google Hangout, and obviously using Google Forms, I think that these are invaluable tools to enhance your teaching, to make your teaching exciting. So, when you're involved with this sort of thing and you get to connect with teachers all over the world and you hear all these success stories, you start to wonder, what would an ideal school look like? If I had unlimited money and I could build the most incredible school in the world, what would it be based on? Well, obviously there is a building, and the building has to be innovative. You have to have an innovative approach to teaching. You have to have the type of students that would obviously engage that type of learning. And if you look at Finland, they've got wonderful models, and by 2020, they're going to have legislated that all schools are now going to be project-based learning centers, which means you won't have individual subjects like math and science and English and history. You're going to get a project, and you're going to get 3 weeks to research that project, and they're going to tie in all those learning areas to that particular project. And then it gives the project more meaning, it gives it context, and the kids can actually apply themselves to a real life situation which actually makes sense to them, as opposed to a subject that they feel they have to learn because that's what they're given at school. So, you look at all these models and you think to yourself, maybe we could implement something like this here in South Africa. And I'm holding thumbs because it's not guaranteed yet, but we've managed to find some funders, and there is a chance that we might be able to be building a school in the next year or so that will encompass the most innovative, the most unbelievable ideas that you could ever imagine in a classroom, where every child, for example, will have to learn a musical instrument and will have to do coding. Because we need to realize that the kids that we are working with today, they are in a world that is very different to the one that we grew up in. We are training kids using systems of teaching that have been around for the last few hundred years. But the kids of today are in an environment that changes on a daily basis. And it's very important that if you actually want these kids to cope in the 21st century, you need to give them 21st century tools. And they need to be able to approach life with all these tools at their disposal. So I'm going to end there. And are there any questions that you'd like to ask? Or if there's anything else you'd like me to talk about, Howie, I'm happy to talk about it.
Yeah, so Steve, something that really caught my eye was the way you were very much doing something fast. I don't know why.
So you say that again?
No, I said, basically, the way I like the way that you work is that you essentially break down classroom barriers and you work completely out of the classroom. In what way could you see that happening in a formal school system? Because something that's really getting me down is that we're living in a school system where things have to be 30 kids in a class, do the best you can with the classwork book. And essentially we're looking at it as a way, how can we break down barriers? Throughout the world today, people are breaking down barriers. I mean, just look at the American elections. Look at what Trump's doing, how he's just breaking down barriers. What happened in London? Maybe you want to relate to that as well.
Have a look at South Africa. We have students that are now protesting at the universities because the government promised free education and they're sick and tired of paying fees for university, and they demand that the university should now be free. Now, in one context, I understand that there are a large percentage of students that can't afford to get the education and they are eligible to study. So in those cases, I think the government should definitely fund them. But then, of course, there are some people, for example, who are just jumping on the bandwagon because it's a political thing and they love protesting, and they've started burning down buildings, they've started harassing people, so much so that the universities have actually closed down for the past couple of weeks, and that means students are not going to be writing final exams now. Some of them are not going to graduate at the end of this year. They'll only be able to graduate next year, which means they've got to pay for an additional semester. And then all the grade 12s who are now writing their final exams, when they apply for university, they can't get in because the universities are full. So these protesters, while there might be merits in what they are protesting about, unfortunately are shooting themselves in the foot. And then, of course, you've got a very polarized country. But in reality, in America, people are talking about the fact that you've got Trump and Clinton and the country's divided. Well, the reality is 25% voted for Trump and 25% voted for Clinton, and the rest did not vote. So I think that's the problem, that you've got complacency. People don't really care. As long as it doesn't affect them, they're not really going to get involved. So when it comes to education...
You've got a group of teachers here that are really looking to turn education on its head, I think. And we're looking at ideas.
Well, how do you do it? It's very simple. It's very simple. So right now, for example, I could teach a class to you. I could invite several other countries into the classroom simultaneously, and I could run a class with 5 or 6 countries on all the different continents, and it wouldn't cost me a cent. So I do believe that what's going to happen is that, and it's already happening now, MIT, Harvard, Oxford, all the top universities are now offering free courses online. And what does that do for you? It means that you can study at your own pace. You can study the subjects that you want. And if you want the piece of paper at the end of the degree, that is when you pay. But if you don't need the piece of paper, you just wanted the course, you can study it free of charge. So I do think that if we look at the way the future's moving, I'm not saying that teachers are going to become obsolete. You'll never be able to replace a good teacher. But what's going to happen is that people's options in terms of what they're going to choose to do is they're going to start moving towards digital models so that kids can study from home. That means you're going to have a lot more homeschoolers. And in South Africa and around the world, there's been a huge upsurge in the number of homeschoolers popping up. I mean, this school that we're envisaging for next year or the year after, maximum 20 kids in a class, because we want it to be, and there will be a support teacher as well. So that the ratios will be absolutely amazing and ideal for learning. But I don't only see using the internet as a teaching tool. From a professional development point of view, I am learning things all the time from my fellow teachers. So some of you might have used Kahoot before. Some of you might have used Plickers before. Do you know about all the new developments of Kahoot? All these new things keep happening all the time. And if you connect with like-minded people, I find that teachers who are part of the community that I work with, they are habitual givers. They just keep giving to each other. And when you keep giving to each other, you end up showing this passion to share. And then when you learn something, you have this passion to share with them. So everyone is sharing, everyone is learning, everyone is gaining. It's a win-win situation. And I do think that, from a teaching point of view, you will pick up many ideas. I mean, what would you do without Pinterest? I'm assuming you've all used Pinterest before.
It sounds like a swear word, Steve, please.
I'm just saying that, you know, some people, they only teach with Pinterest because that's the only source of originality that they can come up with. But they don't realize that there are so many other ideas going on. And when you actually speak to teachers face to face from other countries, and they give you all these wonderful ideas, it will blow your mind with what you are missing out on. And then when you introduce it into your school, all of a sudden, you are seen as this pioneer. But then, for example, Kahoot, and you all know Kahoot, I assume.
Yes.
Okay, so Kahoot, because I am their ambassador in South Africa, they asked me to obviously run Kahoot sessions and training sessions. In South Africa, the reality is that we don't have fantastic internet, and we even have classrooms where they don't have computers. Shock and horror. But you see, the real issue is that how do you play Kahoot in a group of 60 kids when you don't have any devices but the one that you're using to display it on the screen? So we came up with this brilliant idea. This is what we call South African adaptation. Every team gets a piece of paper, and they break it up into 4 pieces, blue, orange, red, green. And we put the question up on the board, and one volunteer grabs their piece of paper and runs to the front and puts it on the table. And when the time is up, no more pieces of paper are allowed. We check to see who brought up the right color because their team name is on that piece of paper. They get awarded the points. The kids come and fetch their paper, go back to the desk, and we go for the next question. So there's no reason why you can't adapt wonderful software like Kahoot to work in an environment where you are even outdoors. So, you know, it's about being creative, and what happens is you might see something that you like and then adapt it to suit your needs because maybe your kids are different. So maybe you work in a school where your kids are learning disabled. Maybe you work in a school where they are actually disabled, so they could be deaf or blind. How do you play Kahoot with blind kids? I don't know, but I'm keen to find out. You know, I was tasked with the opportunity of doing the world's first math show for blind children. And, you know, when someone says to you, you've got to do a show for blind children, and most of the stuff that I do is visual, how do you adapt an entire math show to fit a completely different audience? But I love the fact that I had that challenge because it makes me think differently about the content that I'm teaching. So what would happen if you were teaching an entire class, whatever it is that you're teaching, and they are all blind? How would you change your content to meet their needs? And then this weekend I had a conference, and they had a person who was signing because they had 2 or 3 delegates that were obviously deaf, and they happened to be the principal of a deaf school up in Johannesburg. And it got me thinking, if I had to do a math show for deaf students and not speak, A, the bonus would be that they wouldn't have to hear me for an hour, but B, they would actually get to visualize maths in action without having to hear a sound. And that is another challenge that I haven't come across yet, but I'm looking forward to, which I've already promised them. When I come up to Durban, I will actually go up to their school and do a math show for the deaf kids. So I love a good challenge, and I feel that I would never be exposed to these things if I wasn't going to conferences, if I wasn't connecting with teachers around the world, because if you live in your own little bubble, you only see what is around you. When you are exposed to new ideas, it starts opening your mind to what else could I do? How could I make my classroom a leader in terms of education? And yeah, anything else you would like to know about?
I want to ask a question.
Yeah, I have a question.
Steve's asking a question.
Okay.
Can you hear?
I can hear.
Can you identify any common characteristics of the kind of teachers that you're finding coming aboard with your ideas and with your passion in other countries?
Yes. These are people who are willing to climb out of their comfort zone. That is definitely one characteristic. I mean, I'm coming across quite a few teachers who are willing to climb out of their comfort zone but have zero support from their schools. So they want to establish a Google Hangout with another country and interview them. And the school says, sorry, we can't put Google Hangout on our computers because staff might abuse it and do all their private phone calls during the day on the internet. Some schools, they've only got a 1 meg line, and there's no ways that you can conduct interviews on a slow network. It's only suitable for emails. So there will always be obstacles. But the characteristic that I find about these people is that A, they are willing to climb out of their comfort zone. They're not afraid of failure. But more importantly, they are like-minded. We keep gravitating towards each other. So the kinds of people that are coming to the conferences are already keen. The fact that you're sitting in these chairs means I'm not preaching to people who I need to convince. I think you are there because you know that this is the way to move forward. But what about your colleagues who are going, no, this is too technical for me? How am I'm still battling to send a text message. I mean, the toaster is the most advanced thing I can work at home. How am I supposed to get involved in all of this? So what we find is that the other characteristic is that these teachers are very patient and are willing to sit and find fellow teachers to turn them into champions of technology. And it's not a quick process, but you have to be patient. And the only way to do it is to invite them to take part in something exciting. And when they see how easy it was to do, all of a sudden they go, how do I get involved? So it really is about giving them a taste of something, and then you actually release that inner excitement that they've been holding back with because they're too scared of failure. And I think that's important, that, if you are a teacher and you are so beholden on getting everything right and perfect, you can imagine the kind of pressure that your students will have if you are like that as a teacher. When you come across and say, listen, I don't mind making a mistake because I'm human, but I'm willing to learn, that's an ideal teacher for young kids who want to learn and make mistakes along the way, because they've got to realize that mistakes are what make us better as students and as teachers. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Steve, when I watched you, there were so many things. I don't know if you can do it in front of us here, but is there one or two things you can just show us to make us laugh and see what an amazing teacher you are?
Wow, no pressure at all. Let's see if I can perform a magic trick. So I'm going to ask, who is sitting with the gray top and the bag is on the floor and she's got a hand on her mouth? Yeah, what is your name?
Haley.
Haley, please pick a number from 1 to 63, but do not tell me what that number is. You got a number? Okay. So what I'm going to do, if everything behaves itself, I'm going to load up a PowerPoint, and I'm hoping that all goes well. Let's just see if I can find you here. There you are, and I'm going to go to share screen. And will it allow me to, yes, I think it's working. All right, so Haley, can you see the screen that I've put up now? Yeah. Okay, so you've chosen a number from 1 to 63. I want you to tell me, without giving me the number, is your number on slide A? No?
Not bad.
Is it on B?
Yes.
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 Is it on C?
Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
Is it on D?
No.
No. Is it on E? No.
Yes.
Hold on.
Yes.
Yes on E?
Yes on E.
Yes on E. And F?
Yes. And on F.
I'm going to have to try and work out your number. And my gut instinct tells me, let me just go to stop sharing so that I'm back in action. 54. Now, when I do this particular thing with students, they are always amazed that I can get it right. And then they ask, what would happen if you did it without looking? Because obviously I can see the numbers on the screen. If I did it with my eyes closed, would I still be able to work out the number? And the answer is yes. So now, how does that trick work? Do any of you know?
Well, I know, but I don't want to tell. They look dumbfounded.
Well, you know what's nice about this? You know, I'll email you the actual PowerPoint, and you can print it out and try it with your kids in the classroom. You don't have to do it on the actual big screen. You could, for example, just print it out on paper and then do it in front of the class as well. I'll put it up on the screen again, and I want to see if you spot any of the things that I'm going to point out now. Let's go to over here. Right. I want you to take a look at the top left-hand corner number. What do you notice?
1.
What do you notice now? And now?
2.
2. And now?
4.
Who can guess what's going to come next?
16.
And then?
16.
Very good. And then, of course?
32. 25.
No, 32. 32. So what you've done is that you've noticed that these are actually the powers of 2. 2 to the 0, 2 to the 1, 2 to the 2, 2 to the 3, because that means 2 times 2 times 2, which is 8. And then, of course, 2 to the 4, 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, and that's 2 to the 5. 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. So what has that got to do with the numbers? If you take any number from 1 to 63, let's pretend we take the number 10. Would you agree that if we had to choose from 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, and 32, we could easily make the number 10 by adding 2 and 8? Do you agree?
Yes.
So let's have a look. There's number 10 is not on A, but it is on B. So we would take the number 2 and we would put 2 jelly beans in our mental jar. Is it on C? No, it isn't. So we would ignore the 4. If it's on D, which it is, we take 8 more jelly beans and we pop them into our jar. And right now we've got 10. So if we go to E, it won't be there. And if we go to F, it won't be there. So we know that the number that was chosen was 10. So in other words, the top corner numbers are the ones that we add together when the number appears on that page. The rest of the numbers are the actual numbers that you can make with that top corner number. Did that make sense to any of you? So let's try one. I'm going to choose a number. I'm going to choose a number and you're going to tell me what my number was. All right? So let's pick one now quickly. Okay, I've got one. Is my number on A? It's not on A, no.
We don't have one. Okay, is it on B?
Is it on B? Yes, it... Oh, hold on. I said it's... Let me go back. Sorry. Is it on A? My number is on A.
Change his number in the middle.
It is on A. Sorry. Okay, is it on B? Yes, it is on B. Is it on C? Yes, it is on C. Is it on D? No, it's not. Is it on E? No, it's not. Is it on F? Yes, it is. What was my number? Look at you. Already, you've become maths geniuses, and that was with very little effort.
Okay, Steve, thank you. I want to ask you something else. Last week, we spoke about something that we could do internationally with English. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, if you're thinking about incorporating other schools, other international schools, perhaps South Africa, Israel, South Africa, Japan, Israel, what ideas could you think of?
Okay, well, the one thing I can say is that I work with a lot of schools that are English language, second language speakers. And there are a large community of teachers where obviously their country, English isn't their first language, but they are all learning English at school, and they are doing so many joint activities. So why reinvent the bagel when you can join in? There's, depending on which grades you're working with, they've got World Read Aloud Day, where you get to connect with one or two schools, and then you read a book from your country, but obviously in English, and then they read a book from their country, and the kids get to listen to the stories from different countries. You could, for example, put together a program where you want, I mean, for example, we had a school from Norway come and visit Cape Town, and I set them up with Herzliya, and the kids are now pen pals and are writing about their lives in each country. And then the kids get to connect over the internet and meet face to face. And they get to learn about each other's culture. For them, it's just the novelty of learning about someone else and chatting to someone in another country. They don't realize they're practicing their English. So there are so many ways that you can make content exciting without pushing the fact that it's an English project. This is more about a pen pal project. So it depends on which levels you're dealing with. Maybe you want to do a competition where kids in different countries act out a scene from a Shakespearean play. And then the others get to mark it, and using Google Forms, you can judge it, you know, get all the kids to sit in the computer center, they each fill out a form, and then you get to see what people think about it. Maybe it's a case of, for example, giving a report on what's going on in your country, a news report, and get them to do a report from their country and actually learn about the reality of what's going on and not what CNN and BBC are telling you, because if they can't predict an election, they certainly don't know what's going on in the world. So I think that there's some lovely opportunities depending on how excited you are to do that. And I'm happy to set you up with different countries if you are eager to get projects like that going.
Great. Any other questions? It's just it's beach time in Cape Town. So, any other questions? Okay, Steve, so I'm going to say thank you very much. It was really, really amazing. What was amazing for me is the quality of the internet. I mean, I'm looking at these things, but it was like you were saying here. So, Steve, come out, seriously, come out.
Don't even joke. in the years to come, they will have virtual reality with our little Samsung phones and the virtual reality goggles, like I've got a pair over here. What will happen is that when the broadband increases, they're going to be able to send a 3D signal through the line as opposed to a 2D image. And you will be able to put your goggles on, and I will be sitting in the room with you. And already, if you look at Microsoft HoloLens, they are now already doing that. They've got virtual interactions where two people can talk to each other simultaneously from two separate venues, but be in the same venue with a, what do they call it, an avatar body. So anything.
Yeah, there's something about that as well. It's really quite amazing.
Yeah, so lots of exciting.
Okay, Steve, so thank you very much. On behalf of all the people here and the 1,000 million people that are going to watch it live later on, thank you very much for your time. And I'm pretty sure we'll back your brain again. Thank you.
So now can we get a group photograph? I think we need a group photo.
Yeah, group photo.
You guys are going to get together more towards this side. No, more towards the table, where the table is. Because on the right-hand side, you're going to move to your right. Everyone's going to have to move over to the right, because I can only see...
Camera. I'll move the camera, Rega.
Okay, you can move the camera too. There we go. Now we can see you all.
Hang on.
That's getting better.
Wait, we're getting there. Okay, is that better?
A little bit to the, yeah, a little bit more stuff. And can you bring it down? Can you bring the camera down a little bit?
You're going to miss
That's
the
it.
beach.
There we go. And now we need you in.
Wait, I'm going to get my sign in. Now let me play it all. Okay.
Oh, that is amazing. Okay, and this is the wonderful thing about print screen. You can now share. How you have to move behind you, hiding behind the sign. We need you out.
Perfect. Okay.
That's better. There we go. Right. 1, 2.
Okay.
Here we go. Got you. Got you.
Great.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Shalom.
Enjoy the beach. Enjoy the day.